What is going on, Comic Fam? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am welcoming back to the show Mark Russell. Welcome back, my friend.
Oh, thanks for having me back. This is a great show.
Thanks. I feel like we always got to have you back at the beginning of the year to just kind of. It doesn't feel right until I talk to you. Like it just.
I'm like baby New Year.
That's so next time, next January, you got to come in a sash then.
Yeah, and a diaper.
That's up to you. I wasn't gonna force that on
Yeah,
you, but
people, people, people won't see it, thankfully.
the like we're gonna switch just to audio listening now from now on.
Yeah,
Well, how have you
so I
been?
can eat.
You've been busy writing comics as always. Traveling to Mars wrapped up this year. Batman Dark Ages wrapped up. You're currently doing X Factor with over at Marvel. Like, man, it's been busy, it seems like.
Yeah, although weirdly, I feel like I feel like I was way more busy in 2024 as a writer than I was, in terms of what was being published. I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of things I wrote never even came out in 2024. So I feel like 2025 is going to be the year where a lot of the stuff I spent the last year writing actually hits the shelves,
Okay, so be on the lookout then here in 2025 for a lot more Mark Russell is what I'm hearing.
for better or for worse.
So, well, one of the things we gotta talk about. You had two books that wrapped up this year: Batman Dark Ages and Traveling to Mars. And let's just start with Traveling to Mars. The trade just came out recently. Eisner nominated from a Blaze Comics. Like, let's just talk about this. I know we've talked about it a lot on the show, but just for someone that hasn't gotten to experience traveling to Mars, where was this idea kind of originated for?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I even remember where it started, but I think it was, a convergence of several different things that I was just thinking about. One about like how sort of about like what it would take to like colonize or send a mission to Mars. And the thing that occurred to me right off the bat was like how hard it would be to bring someone back
Mm,
or to send somebody there without the expectation that they're just going to die there. So I think that's probably where the story began, just thinking about the difficulties in sending a human being to Mars. And that would be the biggest sort of piece of the puzzle. It's like, well, if you could just find someone who's willing to die there, and then why would anybody will be willing to die there? That's sort of what began the story about how the money and the desperation on the part of the Roy, the guy who agrees to go.
yeah. And this has been talked about on a lot of best of 2023, best of 2024 comics, because it spanned quite a while. You even, in a video on the Kickstarter said like this is one of the best things that you've written. What is it about this book do you think that resonates with people so much? And
I
yourself?
think it's well, I think because it's not only is it science fiction, it's highly personal. Like it really is sort of reading the internal thoughts of another human being, some of which are mine. But I think this is what I think people look for in any sort of fiction, other than just a good story. What they really look for is a moment of authenticity, a feeling like you are talking directly to them, human to human, that you're bearing your soul to them. I think that if you can do both, if you can tell a story that works on like a plot level and it's like keeps people turning pages, but also be real and tell people about what it is you actually care most about in the world or what it is that's haunting you, then I think you've really got something.
Yeah. When your main protagonist, Roy, he's dealing with a lot of stuff, right? Battling, the facing the impending doom that he's going to have cancer and that he's traveling to Mars here. And it's really this kind of reflective self look into, what is his immortality, regrets and stuff like that. So, like, how much you said a little bit of you thrown in, like, how personal, like, does your personality and your, personal views come into your writing, especially something personal like this?
Well, I think a lot because it's almost impossible for me not to about how close we are to being doomed as a civilization, if not as a species. And so that occupies a lot of my waking time. And these are all kind of thoughts I've had about that, the ruminations about like immortality or our own, not only our own impending mortality in terms of us as individuals, but as us as a species. And it's not hopeful, but I think that this is what you do as an artist: is you create something out of the chaos. You create meaning where there was none. And I feel like I hope that that's the takeaway, that it's not just gloom, it's not just feeling doomed, but it's also looking for hope, even if it's just imagined.
Yeah. No, and it does, and I think where you take the story in a way that it doesn't end necessarily the way we assume it will originally, but there still is hope in there of whatever it is. And I don't want to give stuff away because I want people to read it if you haven't read it.
Yeah,
um
please
but
don't. Yeah, I appreciate the non spoilers because there are some turns in the story.
yeah. Was it harder for you writing this book? Because it seems like it's a lot more narrative focused, right? Like where it's a lot of inner dialogue and writing kind of from a diary form. So does that change your writing format or process at all compared to like, something like X Factor where you have like a team of all these different characters? Like how do you change your writing style, or does it change at all?
Well, I feel it does change, but I feel like what's going on when I'm writing is the internal stuff is always there. It's just that usually I can't have, pages that are just narration or my own internal thoughts. Usually I have to like get rid of that stuff just so I can put in dialogue and action,
Yeah.
sound effect, just so I can have like some roar sound effect. I have to like get rid of a private thought. And you try to like embed your thoughts in the actual plot of the story and in the dialogue of the characters. But this one, I didn't have any of those sort of barriers. It was just I was able, because he's writing a diary,
Yeah.
I'm able to just sort of like talk directly to the reader about this is what I have to say to you, human to human.
Yeah.
And it's a very direct form of writing, very personal. And I found it enormously therapeutic to be able to do it that way.
Yeah. Oh, one of the things too I liked about in the trade is you have a cover gallery of all the stuff, all the covers. I didn't even realize how many variant covers you all had for this book. There's a
Yeah.
lot.
An insane number of variant covers. When I'm doing conventions, people bring up variant covers I never saw. Like
Really?
there's more out there than I was even aware of.
Are people bringing Traveling to Mars a lot to you at conventions?
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I think that it's one of those that was really it sort of picked up momentum as it goes along.
Mhm.
Like you rarely see this in comics, where usually it's just like, well, people bought issue one or issue two and didn't really buy anything after that because they're waiting for the trade. But this one in particular, I think people were really kind of discovering it midstream. So there's people who are bringing me like issues four or five or six who never even who couldn't get their hands on an issue number one.
Oh wow. Do you, and a lot of word of mouth, I know. And then this also it got nominated for an Eisner what halfway through the publication run, give or take?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It was nominated for the best new series for 2023, and then we had a gap because it ended in 2024, but the trade hadn't come out. The trade didn't come out till just now, so about a year between when the series ended and when the trade came out. So hopefully it's eligible again in 2025 because
I don't know the
it,
rules, but I will
I
petition
don't know
for it.
either. I
So
don't, you can't, even though we all love to be nominated and win awards, you can't really think with them in mind because it's so capricious. I have no idea how any of it works.
well, but it is probably does have to feel a little bit rewarding, like you say, you don't write for the rewards, but like something that's so personal to get recognized,
Yeah.
and especially it's a
I'm
smaller
I am
publisher.
not
It's
I am not above it all. I am not too cool for school. It's like when I'm nominated for award and when I win one, I'm ecstatic. But yeah, you can't plan for that. It's
yeah,
because it's sort of like, planning for the weather 3 months from now. It's like I have no idea what the weather is going to be like on like say, June 10th. I
right.
just have to be prepared for anything.
Yeah. Well, it is a great book. It's available on trade. So if you missed out and you're listening to this and you're like, I need to check this out, and you do, order it from your local comic shop. It's something that you all need to read and indulge in. It's so good.
Yes, please and thank you. I have, if nothing else, the ultimate award for me is just people reading this because I feel like you said earlier, this is maybe the best thing I've ever written. And this is definitely something I want sort of embedded in my tombstone. So please at least check it out.
Yeah. So, one of the other things that wrapped up this year was Batman Dark Ages, and this was kind of in the same universe as your Superman Space Age from a couple years ago. Uh, how was it? I know you did a lot of changes this time of where Superman Space Age was 3 issues. This one you kind of broke it up into six. And like, did those decisions that you all made go into it? Like, did that work the way you were hoping for with this series?
Yeah, I think it worked out. I mean, it's ultimately the same length
Yeah,
because Superman was three issues of 80 pages, Batman was 6 issues of 40 pages. But I think the good thing about doing the 6 issues, other than the fact that we didn't have to charge $10 a an issue, which I think was why they've decided to go with 6 issues of $5 each, even though they cost exactly the same.
right.
Well, it's just a lower bar of entry for people who want to take a chance on it, which I get.
Yeah.
But the other thing it did sort of, I think, which was good, was that it forced me to be thinking in terms of um, uh, ending a story or coming up with a good sort of like ending point every 40 pages.
Yeah.
So I kept the storytelling feeling very urgent and very sort of, it was moving ahead at all times, even though these stories are by nature more reflective and they take place over a longer period of time. It's good to still, think, okay, this story needs to move. We need to get hopping if we're going to get everything. I think readers respond to that where it feels like a story's not like a sort of marinating or wallowing in its own sort of odor, but it is continuously like you have to keep turning the pages to keep up. And I feel like this one, maybe even more so than the Superman one, was like that. It was more of a like a page turn. Things happen more quickly.
Yeah. These these kind of, they're set in this universe that you and the Allreds created wonderfully so, and you have almost like an Elseworlds type story, right? It's characters that we're familiar with, but there's different backgrounds and different, how they got to where they're at. Where was it for you that you're like, these are some of the routes that I wanted to have Batman go through and Bruce Wayne, have to go through some of his struggles as a teenager that we don't see in most origin stories or stuff like that?
Well, most of their origin stories are written in the 1930s and they're written at a time when people weren't thinking about setting these in actual history, probably because actual history was just too terrible to imagine. Late 1930s people wanted escapism, and they also wanted, they had like one page to introduce, where
Right.
Clark came from or where Batman came from. They had to get into the action, but having the opportunity to sort of write these set on universes, not only different universes, but universes that we know are going to be destroyed in the Crisis on Infinite Earths, allow me to take some liberties with the origins and really actually make them set in human history,
Mhm.
like in a way that makes sense with the events that were going on in the 50s and 60s and 70s. Um, and that's a luxury I have that they didn't have when they were writing these comics, because I know what history it was, I know what things were important, people are going to remember back then, and two, just because I have the luxury of talking about these events in the past, whereas they had to like sort of make timeless, you know, um, crime stories.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things you do, like you introduce different characters, um, that we see in the Justice League, but also Batman's Rogues Gallery a little different. And there were some creative choices for costumes. Was that yours or already like where was this kind of like how you wanted to create some of these iconic characters and show them in a different light?
All costume choices, all visual choices are done by Mike and Laura Allred, uh, and that's for the best.
Yeah.
I would When we started working on this series, I sent him a bunch of pictures because I had imagined the villains being sort of like 70s glam rock inspired, like they all dress like David Bowie or T-Rex or Susie Quattro or something. But he's the man. It's like
Right.
Coles to Newcastle. He's the master of that era and like knowing. So he took that and like sort of raised the ante and came up with his own sort of costumes. But I really loved what he did with it aesthetically.
Yeah. It's something that's wonderful. The whole book came about really well, and like getting to see Bruce go through some stuff that is interesting, and you kind of frame it in this unique setting of where Bruce is in the first issue, and you see it throughout the story is where he's kind of trying to remember what was going on in his life. Where was kind of the idea to frame the story the way you did?
That was kind of the original concept of it. Is like this is going to be Bruce Wayne telling his story for the first time, like telling people for the first time that I was Batman and this, this is my story. But he would be doing it so old that he'd be suffering from dementia. So he's not sure if he's remembering it correctly
Mhm.
or if this is like, and in fact, he does get things wrong, as we
Yeah.
find out towards the end. He does get some things wrong. But to me, that was like kind of what was really sort of meaningful about it was the fact that this is someone struggling not only with the things they did in their life and the people they accidentally got killed or the choices they made in life, but struggling just to remember if this is in fact what happened, which I think we all do in some way. We create our own sort of lore, our own mythology that we call memory. And God knows if any of it's, really true.
Yeah, I've heard it said the farther you get away from high school, the better you have memories of your experience was.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's what we call perspective. And the perspective, I think, really helps Bruce Wayne in telling the story. But the dementia is not as helpful. The,
No.
the dementia sort of detracts from it. But there's these sort of heartbreaking moments where he realizes he can't remember, Dick Grayson's name,
Yeah.
you know, uh, and where like it's like forgetting things about Alfred. It's like we don't really hold on to things forever. Things are taken from us. What we hold on to is the way they made us feel, the
Yeah.
way these feelings we had for these people that have affected our lives are the last embers to go out. And I take some solace in that even, and I've gone through this with relatives who were, going through dementia and couldn't remember my name. They could still remember me. They still remembered that they loved me. And to me, that was incredibly, moving to see someone struggling to remember my name, but knowing they wanted to remember it. And I wanted to give that same sort of sense of struggling to find the good that was in his life to Bruce Wayne.
So we had Superman, we have Batman. Is there plans that or like a desire for you to continue this universe of creating more in this space age, dark age universe?
Yeah, I'm probably talking a little out of turn because it hasn't been announced yet, but we are doing a Wonder Woman series next.
Nice. So, well, listen, no one from DC watches myself, so we're good.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think they're used to me spilling the beans. I don't think I think they realize once they once they approve something, I'm gonna talk. I can't. I'm too excited to not talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I won't push the luck any further, but I'm excited for that then. And when it comes out and announced, we'll talk about it. So,
Right.
um, so you have currently you got a series with Marvel, X Factor. You got this ongoing there of in this extended universe of all the X-Men and stuff like this. How for you does it change going from like doing your mini series and your maxi series that you kind of create to, stepping back into sometimes these ongoing series?
Yeah, it's very different. It's an incredibly different writing experience because when you're doing the limited series, especially ones like these that are on dying universes, like the Batman and
Yeah.
Superman one, it's like you're much less tied to canon. You're much less tied to continuity. Whereas when you're writing X Factor in the current sort of X-Men universe, it's like you get a lot of notes. It's like, no, this can't happen, or no, this has to change, and or oh, this isn't right for this character, and so you have to sort of you have to color much more within the lines on an ongoing than you would with a limited, which is probably why I usually do the limiteds. But it's been fun. I mean, I have to say, if you have to choose a universe to do that in, the X-Men universe is an incredible one to do because there's so many cool characters and there's so much to say about them. There's so many different angles from which to approach the mutants in this universe that it's an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there are times where they're like, you can't use this character, and you're like, okay, I have 100 other characters that I can usually fit in.
That's exactly what it's like. It's sort of like the fantasy football draft or something. It's like it's like, no, you can't use that characters. They're in, NYX, or oh no, they're in Uncanny X-Men. It's like, well, and so when I was forming the cast, with my editor, Darren, I just said, well, okay, here's what I want. I need a character who's just got brute strength, just like someone for frontal assaults. And he's like, well, Frenzy's available. I'm like, she's on the team. but things like that. And they also, the cool thing about working with the mutants in the X universe too is that you also get to make them up. You'll get to make up some. So that was for me probably the most fun, getting to make up my own mutants. Made
Which
up.
you have some really good ones that you made up. I have a favorite, but who's your favorite that you've made up so far?
I think my favorite of the ones that I've created is Granny Smite, the old woman who can't die.
Yes. It's so good. Favorite as well. And like what you're getting to do with that character of exploring some things like, like, oh, yeah, you can't die, so maybe you're not right for this mission and things like this. And I was like, I would never have thought like of some of these things that you're processing through in this book, which is fantastic.
One of the things that one of the joys of writing this series is that I got to pair an 87-year-old woman who cannot die with a 17-year-old boy, Zyber, who's afraid he's going to die at any moment. Because every time he uses his powers, he risks death because his power is to like emit this incredibly powerful electromagnetic pulse, which is like getting a million X-rays. And he has no idea how many of these pulses he has before it basically just kills him. And every time he uses it, he's like down for the count for the rest of the day and doesn't know if he's going to wake up again. So it's kind of this interesting, bipolar experience of mortality, where it's like the youngest person on the team could die at any moment, and the oldest person on the team can't die, and so they're approaching the same problem of mortality from two opposite ends.
How did you get connected with X Factor? I know you said, you don't typically tend to go towards ongoing and stuff because you like to have the freedom of a limited. How'd you get connected with this run and what made you kind of say, yep, I want to do this?
Well, I was offered it, which is, it's like yes, please, but that's the basics. The short story. My editor Darren Shawn contacted me and asked me if I'd be interested in writing X Factor, and I've always wanted to do something in the X universe just because I really enjoy it. It's one of the best comic book sort of worlds out there. So I, didn't have to think too hard. I just said, yeah.
Yeah. I also now am only envisioning like you and Gail and Jed like in just a fantasy football draft room at a bar, just going, I wanted that one, Gail. Come on.
No, it's not like, yeah, no, I'm not taking any mutants from Gale, believe me. Um, or yeah, Jed, but seeing what they do with it is just like it's great. It's like it's I deal with some sort of like imposter syndrome, I think, sometimes as a comic book writer, because I didn't really grow up reading a lot of superhero or Marvel or DC comics. So I'm coming into this not probably the least knowledgeable writer on the team. But it's fascinating to me to see people who know what they're doing at work. And it's not just discouraging either. It's also kind of encouraging because I feel like, well, really, in the end, what they're writing are just stories. They're writing just good, solid stories. So it doesn't matter that I don't know, all thousand mutants in the X-Men universe, or I'm not worried about gravel filling the backstories of all these characters. Just tell a good story using these characters, and that's good enough.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure that that plays into when you have an editor a little bit too of like saying like this is a type of character I need that then it already when you're dealing with characters that are established, right? It gives you freedom to you don't have to go into the backstory as much because they're
Yeah,
people know where to go with
that's
it.
the way I choose to look at it. It's like, and maybe it's just because I'm a loafer, but it's like that's not my job. That's
Yeah.
the editor's job. The editor's job is to keep me in bounds. The editor's job is to tell me no, this character's not available, or oh no, that character would never act that way. It's just my job to create the best sort of soup I can out of these ingredients.
Yep. And you obviously you're telling your own stories separate from the other X books that are going on. How much communication though do you have to have with the other creators to kind of like make sure that they're maybe heading in the somewhat same direction without, completely crossing?
Well, not much unless there's a crossover, or
Okay.
which there are two issues so far, which we had to be heavily in communication with other teams because we were working directly with them, like um, the Doom World crossover where they announced that Doom is taking over the planet, and then also the Manhunt crossover, which is happening right now. Both of which I had to be really sort of in contact, especially the creative teams whose stories in the sequence fall directly before and directly after you. You really got to like know where they are. You can't really just do anything and expect them to pick up the ball wherever you choose to leave it. So it's a unique writing experience for me. I'm not used to working that
Yeah.
way. And it is sort of a fire hose of information sometimes. These email chains or discords, just like there's just so many people firing on all. There's so many teams working at once. It's like drinking from a hose. Uh, but but in a way, it's kind of like just good to experience the other side of writing a big two comic. Like this is what it is usually like. It's usually a lot of planning. It's usually more like working in like a writing room for like a sitcom or like a CSI than it is, writing like a Russian novel where you're sort of like in your own little hut for the winter with your alone with your own thoughts, which is the way I usually write.
So like when you're doing something like this, do you do much research at all of like past X Factor stuff, or is it just like, no, this is a story I want to tell, and you kind of let the editor kind of help guide you with some of that stuff?
I do more research than normal.
Okay.
Usually, especially when I'm working with superheroes or capes and tights
Yep.
comics. I try to do as little research as possible because I don't want it to be derivative. I don't want it to just be a retelling because I think there's already too much of this in superhero comics where it's like professional wrestling and you're just pairing people with people they haven't fought with in a long time, and and I think that the best thing I can do is sort of enter with ignorance, not know what's going on, and sort of use that to my advantage. But with something like this, I really did more research because I need to know more about what these characters are like, their history, especially since they're just leaving one of the iconic sort of
Yep.
runs of X-Men comics of all time. So I have to know where what was going on in Krakoa with these characters before they entered my world. And that's kind of what largely it's about. It's about we had this vision of what it meant to be a mutant and it's been destroyed. So now there's this diaspora where everyone's got different ideas of what it means to be a good mutant.
Mhm. Well, and there's one part in the your first issue where I think it was the first issue where there's a dialogue, um, and the saying it says you don't change from things from the inside, it changes you. This kind of what you have mutants trying to figure out, like, well, I'm gonna join this because I want to kind of, change it and put my stamp on it. Well, the other's like, well, I'm going this route. So like that was a very powerful kind of like mindset to kind of just think of this is where the story kind of is going.
Yeah, joining something is usually fraught and not usually the best way to change the thing you're joining. It's more often than not you just sort of conform to whatever it is you're joining,
Yeah.
which is sort of the lesson that Havoc has to learn with X Factor.
Yeah. Where was it the idea for the like your story? Like I wanted to tell this X Factor story, with the whole click clock and corporation and stuff like that. Where did you kind of come about with this and say this is the route I want to go?
Well, I think that two of the most poisonous forces in the world right now are nationalism and digitalization, or the sort of algorithm
Mhm.
of social media. These are two of them, and so I wanted to sort of combine them somehow, so that it's like people joining X Factor are going to be uh, tossed at sea by both sets of waves, like having to make good social media videos, having to make good sort of click clock videos to monetize the team, and then also like feeling like they are serving a team that they're serving a country that isn't serving them back, that
Yeah.
isn't looking out. They're looking out for the interests of people who don't really care whether they live or die, which is what a lot of people in American and other nations' history have done. They think, well, if we just sign up, if we just fight this war for them, then they'll respect us, and it doesn't happen. And it's sort of the disappointment in thinking that you will get the respect that you're giving, or that people that you are protecting will protect you back.
Yeah. It's I've been reading the X Factor series as it's been coming out monthly, but also prepping for the interview. I went back and reread them in order, and I'm like, man, you talk about life does imitate art a lot. Art imitates life a lot here.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, wow, this kind of feels real. One of the things though that I think that's interesting too is like there's moments where you talk about how often like social media and the social media presence, like the things that we put up there, like they're in a whether they're in a fight or something, like how do they know this element about me. They're like, well, they probably looked at your account, your social media
Mhm.
account, and they gained all this stuff. And like those moments where you're going, oh yeah, I probably am putting way too much information out there online.
Yeah, though this is how everyone will be undone. This is how we're all undermining ourselves. It's like we are putting out like our weakness. We're putting out our Achilles heel for everyone to see all constantly. So we shouldn't be surprised when it's weaponized against us.
Yeah. So, well, Mark, I want to respect your time. Like I said, we could talk about comics forever. And I hesitate to ask because you said you've been busy. Are there things that have been announced that you can talk about that's coming out?
Yeah, there's some things I'm really excited for. I have a non-comics book, a prose book about the Brothers Grimm fairy tales called Grim and Grimmer, and that comes out on February 25th. So hopefully people will check that out. I'm very happy with it, and I tell some of the really famous retell some of the really famous Brothers Grimm fairy tales like Hansel and Gretel and Cinderella, uh, Rapunzel, and also some really obscure ones, things you've never heard of. So, and it's all sort of filtered through my lens. So please check that out. And also, I'm doing a sci-fi anthology series with Ryan Alexander Tanner called Vanishing Point. And it's coming out of Mad Cave, and it's like basically if I were writing the Twilight Zone.
Okay. I'm hooked now. I mean, that that fits right up your alley. You writing episodes of the Twilight Zone, so I'm in.
It's one of the things I've always wanted to do in comics, write a good sci-fi anthology, and I'm really excited for this to come out.
Well, and I think like like you see a lot of some of your works of like, the sci-fi of the analogy of humans, like, not all robots and other stuff like that. Like, so to put in now sci-fi in an anthology, I'm here for it.
Yeah, no, I write a lot of science fiction, and I've written some one shots, here and there, like Death Ratioed,
Mhm.
and I've got some sci-fi one shots coming out through Ahoy. It's really kind of what I'm writing about half the time because I feel like it's the perfect way for me to talk about what's going on in the world without getting too depressed about it. It's like, well, it's not happening on this world. It's happening in the future. It's happening there.
Yeah. Well, gang, check it out. So, traveling to Mars, all the stuff that we talked about with X Factors coming out, your new prose novel, like that, I'm excited because I love a good book just as much as I love to read comics. So sign me up.
Thanks. Yeah.
Well, where can people follow along with you with stay up to date with what you're writing and your weaknesses and your stats that if they want to
Yeah.
utilize that
No,
against you, where can they find your stats?
come pilfer my digital online presence at Bluesky. Uh, my handle is Manrus, Manruss on Bluesky, Instagram, and Threads.
Well, there you go, gang. Go check out all these books. And Mark, I look forward to checking out all the stuff that you got coming out and chatting again soon.
That'd be great.
So, with that being said, gang, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.